Welcome to Real Talk with Katie Kim. This episode is for the investor who's done well but refuses to be misled. The kind of woman who wants alternatives, wants tax efficiency, but will not wing it with something she doesn't understand. That's trust first, proof driven, calm authority, no hype. Courtney Moeller is the founder behind Iron Horse Energy Fund, and she's been in oil and gas her whole life. Midland, Texas roots and multi-generational industry background. She's also a U.S. Navy veteran and a frequent educator in this space. Today, we're going to cover her story, how she vets deals, what a good deal looks like, what a bad one taught her, and how investors should think about risk, taxes, and transparency without getting talked over. This episode is coming out during National Women Investor Month, and I want to be clear why that matters. Not because women need more motivation, but because women deserve access, education, and clear decision frameworks in rooms they're historically kept out of. Courtney, welcome to Real Talk with Katie Kim. I am so excited to have you here today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. I'm so honored. This is such an honor. And what an amazing month to be able to come and be a guest on your podcast. I didn't even realize it was Women Investor Month. So that's super cool.
It is, yeah, and we found it out. We are leaning into it this month. So we got some great things coming out on the education side, as well as some tools for women investors. So I want to jump right in because I know we were starting to talk and I was thinking of like, we just should hit record. So go ahead and give us the real origin story. Like, how did oil and gas become normal life for you?
Well, and it's funny because, being an oil and gas fund manager was never on my bingo card. And, I was talking to my partners yesterday. And, I'm originally from Midland, which is West Texas, which is right in the heart of the Permian Basin, which is the #1 oil and gas producing area in the United States. And my dad is a petroleum engineer, or was. He passed away back in 2011, but my brother followed his footsteps, and my uncle has a well servicing company. My whole family's been involved in oil and gas, and we have lived and drilled in Abu Dhabi and Pakistan, and my dad drilled in Jakarta for 20 years before he retired. And so just really cool. And I can remember back in the day listening to my brother and dad talk about, different ways that they were different projects they were drilling and things they were doing. And I would always listen, but I was interested, but didn't have any interest in going down that path as far as work. I mean, I'm kind of like a good old boy, but I'm also a girly girl. And that job is dirty. Working out on those rigs is dirty. My brother would always come home so dirty. And I thought, oh gosh, I would need something out there where I could wash my hands all day. I don't know. It's just not my thing. But man, I inherited my dad's company back in 2011, and we've continued to drill throughout West Texas in that Permian Basin area. And really, that was kind of, I guess, really the beginning of what led me here. And really, in 2016, there were sanctions lifted against Iran, and it dropped oil prices. And that really hit my personal income really hard. And I thought, okay, I've got to figure out how we are not tied to the price of a barrel of oil. Like, it really impacted our personal income significantly. And, it sent me down this path of diversification and, how do we create more income? And I guess really at the end of the day, what I've learned over this last, decade of, investigating things and trying to educate myself is that we're not given an education in finances and all of these, special tax benefits and investment options and opportunities that are out there. And as I've gotten involved and gone to more conferences, my mind has been blown. And, now I'm on like this mission of creating this legacy and building wealth and showing my kids there's a different way. And then I've learned that my investors that work with me, they're on the same path. So, we're kind of figuring this all out together. So that was kind of really more of an overall picture instead of just a background, but
Yeah, no, I love it. So, because when you inherited the family company, like you were actually drilling the wells and you're in the throes, right? Like you're in it.
Yeah. And I've never been the one that's actually out there drilling those wells. I mean, it's always been with major operators. Everything we've always done has been with major operators. A lot of my personal holdings are with ConocoPhillips and Exxon and XTO and these big companies. And I guess what was really cool was back in like the 70s, my dad was a petroleum engineer. One of his best friends was a geologist, and the other one, I can't remember what he did, but but they all worked for like Texaco and Chevron and these big companies. And they would go and find oil out in the Permian Basin and then come back to, say, a Texaco or an Exxon and say, hey, we've got this big oil and gas project. We'll sell this to you. We want to retain this much of a working interest or royalty or whatever. And so they would put these together. And so some of the wells I have in my portfolio were drilled back into the 70s and they're still producing today. So I got grandfathered into a lot of what he built, 50 years ago, which is crazy when you think about that. And so all of the different projects that these guys go and do move forward now, we get to be a part of. Some of it is through, royalty interest. We own several thousand royalty acres, your mineral acres out in West Texas. And so we participate that way. And then some, they come and say, hey, we're going to drill over here. Do you want to participate in it? So I participate, but I'm not the one that's actually drilling.
Okay, so we're digging in, and I love this. And if all my listeners know, like sometimes we just go right in, we don't start to step in. So we may come back, But talk to me real quick about, or explain to our listeners when you say legacy and those different rights. So the two different ways that you were saying, like we had some legacy options to invest in there, and then investing with these like the third party. So what's the difference in how you go into those deals or those opportunities?
And that's a great question. So there's a lot of different ways that you can participate when it comes to drilling new wells with, really any kind of operator. And I think probably the two most common, or, what I see the most, is through either working interests or royalties. And there's a difference in the two. So royalties means that and let me also be clear, typically when you own, royalties or working interest, you don't own the land. It's just the rights to the minerals on that land. They've been separated a long time ago. So it's usually different owners. You still can see find land where they still own the mineral rights, but they're typically separated. But royalties means that, let's say you own a, 5% royalty interest in 1,000-acre plot of land. Anything that gets drilled on that land, you're going to have 5% of any of the wells, and you're not responsible for any of the costs, which is great. There's not any tax benefits or anything. And it's funny because typically you'll get a letter in the mail one day that says, hey, we drilled these wells and here's a check. I'll never forget the first time that happened. I didn't even know that was a thing. And
those are bad emails.
Oh my gosh, it's like the best letter in the mail to open ever. I get this letter that says, hey, we drilled these wells over here and here's a $40,000 check. And it was like, holy cow, that's awesome. That's like the best piece of mail to get ever. Well, now, there's no tax benefits, but you're also not responsible for the costs. Now, working interests, I'm a lot more intentional about my working interest because for that, you are responsible for like the monthly operating costs, the drilling costs, and everything that go into it. But with these, you get amazing tax benefits. So you get tax benefits that offset like W-2 income, capital gains. It can offset different types of income, but then you're also responsible for those monthly operating expenses. But there's ongoing tax benefits as well. So they're both great to own, but it really kind of depends on what your wealth strategy is and what your financial needs are as to which one might meet your needs for where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I like how you say that and thank you for explaining that, because even going into any industry, there's a different terms and levers and different ways you can pull. And so, it makes me think, I'm sure people listening that have their real estate license have gone through, it's like, oh, those are the mineral rights. Those are the water rights that we always have to get tested on to pass that. But the one thing I like how you said is where it depends what your strategy is. And that's where it's like, you got to slow down to speed up to figure out what is my strategy? What do I need? And like, can I risk this money or do I need to look at it? And I often think I was just talking about this with another friend where yesterday where she was talking about like, yeah, everybody wants to do this birthing, but they don't have any time to do the fit out. I kind of think the same thing. Like if you don't have time to know and learn and make the relationships in the oil and gas industry, but yet you want to invest, there's not a lot of opportunities that you can just, walk right in and say, hey, I want to invest and let's go. It's stepping into those relationships and trusting people. And you've put together I'm going to say a hell of a team. Like, how did you start to put together that team and curate really the experience on the operation side? And then I want to dig into a little bit more on the investment structure side that you put together.
Well, it's funny that you asked that because when I got into this space and I learned that people were pulling money together to buy assets, my mind was blown and I was like, "Holy cow, this is amazing. Like, how did I never think about that or figure that out?" I'm a pretty smart girl, but people were pulling money together to buy apartments and storage units and I thought, "Okay, I am going to go syndicate apartments or storage," or I had shiny object syndrome and I wanted to do all the things. And then I figured out that, holy cow, I don't know what the heck is a cap rate and what are all these things. I come from the oil and gas space, so all the terminology was very different and I was very overwhelmed. And I know that people that specialize in real estate, when they come and look at oil and gas, they feel the exact same way, but this is very natural for me. And so I just thought, okay, I don't understand any of this stuff. I am just going to stick to my lane and I'll invest in other people, in other people's deals in these asset classes, because really the tax benefits of oil and gas, they're all, it's very special. And it's funny, we talked a little bit about, knowing where you're trying to go and what your goals are. I think this was a mistake I made years ago, was just because I had shiny object syndrome. I was like, yes, I want apartments. And I'm throwing money into all these different deals because these people were in this group that I had joined. And I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how to do due diligence. I didn't even know what to ask. I feel like I'm a very honest, transparent person, and I expect other people to be that way also. And that was a very expensive learning lesson, which we can definitely circle back to. I figured out that that's definitely not the case. But I thought, man, I'm just going to stick with what I know. And there's not a whole lot. I mean, there are deals out there in oil and gas, but finding good deals is tough. And finding the right partners and the right people it's tough. And it's tough in any asset class. And so I went on this mission. I was like, okay, I need my own land, man. If I'm going to bring oil and gas to the table, I want to bring Exxon and Continental and EOG. I want to bring these multi-billion-dollar companies. But that was a challenge in itself because these are multi-billion-dollar companies. They don't need our money to go drill their wells, but that's who I wanted to participate with. So,
Love it.
it's such a freaking good old boy network too. Such a good old boy network. And it really is about who you know and things like that. It's a very big, relationship built type of business. I will never forget, I used to hang out in the 007, this bar in Midland. I don't know how many oil and gas deals were done in the bars in Midland, Texas, but back in the day, that was what it was. These guys are in their cowboy boots and hat and they're shaking hands over a beer at a bar. And I got Barbie dolls and candy and I got paid to wash their beer glasses. I was like living my best life when I was a kid. But those relationships. And so I just started tapping into people and I started asking investors who they were investing with and, just going down all these rabbit holes, found a landman that I figured out has the ethics and integrity and a partner that I wanted. And, also access, because access is a big deal, and approached him a few years ago and said, look, this is what I want to do. Here's what I can do for you. Here's what you can do for me. Would you be willing to, work together and give it a shot? And we are now just closed out our 6th deal together and it's going great. It's amazing. I sit there and I just think I'm an oil and gas fund manager. Like that's just so wild. Never did I think I'd be raising capital and buying oil and gas interests and managing funds and managing these deals, but I love it. And the way that is built, we were talking earlier about scars. A lot of the scars that I have gotten from when I entered this space are really, it's funny you bring that up because yesterday I was literally kind of working on my value canvas for this year. And one of the things that I came up with was the fact that my deals are built from scars and not spreadsheets. The things that I've gone through and what I'm trying to help other people avoid are built into my deals, and it matters to me and it's a big deal. So I'm super excited about what we've created. The partners I have are phenomenal, and really don't know what people are like and who they really are until you go through the tough stuff.
Oh, yes.
That's when you
Mhm.
really see what people are made of and
Yeah.
if they have integrity or not. And it's hard because everybody sounds like they do, right?
Oh
Everybody
yeah.
sounds amazing. Everybody loves everybody and they're putting everything is great and everything sounds magical, but you really don't get to see people's true colors and who they are until the shit hits the fan. Pardon my
Mhm.
French. I mean, you just
Yeah.
don't.
All on there. Yeah. And I always say it's like when you're in the trenches with them. Like, don't
Yes.
tell me that you made all this money when times were great. Tell me you've gone through like 08, 09. How'd you pivot? Tell me you've gone
Yes.
through COVID and you kept your tenants, in business. And, we talk about like you're saying, I was thinking when you were talking about investing in apartments and everything, I'm like, yeah, you're probably thinking like these oil wells, they don't call me because their toilet's broken. They don't call me because I was like, yes. And again, every strategy has a different need,
They
right?
all and they all have their ups and downs. They do.
Oh,
They all have
100%.
their pluses and minuses,
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's what's important. And I always try to think about, what do I need to make sure I'm adding in next time? What do I need to
Mm,
add some clarity on? Because sometimes I've been in this space for so long, it's very easy, the things that are natural and normal to me because I've dealt with it my whole life. I have to stop and remind myself that not everybody knows this. It's not
oh, yeah.
common knowledge, right?
Yes, I feel you on that. I was on a call the other day and I try and keep everything very high level because when I do real estate development, I do a lot of economic incentives and we're doing a very strategic structure for those impact because they're more impactful developments and economic, revitalizations. Was like I always try and keep the conversation very high level. And then she was like, yeah, she kind of like said, like, yeah, I'm in this, I can go deep. And I went like deep and it was like overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, you meant like just a next level
I
deep.
am so
Not
that
like
person. I am so that person. I'll end up, you'll ask me a question and then my brain just goes in 18 directions and I try to cover all of it in 1 second. I'm trying to do better. I really am.
Well, we should go to the same therapy because I mean, because again, your heart is like you want people to understand this. And I know we've done a couple of sessions and especially a master class in oil and investing, which we'll put that link as well if people want to dive in a little bit more. It's hard, but I also think it shows like your depth and breadth. Like when you talk about like your family being involved, I mean, that had to shape like early on, shape your involvement in risk because I know some of my listeners that do like multifamily or small commercial want to get into oil and gas and they're like, that's just so risky. It's so risky. And it's so interesting to hear you on the other side being like, that's so risky, but it's what you know. So how did that like early on with your family's involvement shape your risk profile and tolerance?
Well, it's okay. So, and this is such a great topic because things have changed so much in the oil and gas space. Back when oil first started, I mean, okay, I'm blown away first of all that they even figured out that there was oil in the ground and that it could be, extracted and turned into fuel and plastic and product like people amaze me all the time. But it used to, in some areas, just literally seep out of the ground. And it was used to make medicines and different things. And then, I watched a video here recently where the first guy was drilling down in the ground and the hole kept collapsing on itself. And he finally used a cast iron tube that he put down there to keep it open. And I think it was hit oil at like 70 feet. But things have changed. But here's the thing is, they used to drill just these straight holes down into the ground and you may or you may not hit oil. And it was expensive and it was risky. And if you drilled and you didn't hit anything, you were just out all the money that you put into that well. It was done. And so
Oh,
that's actually why we have such great tax benefits is because of the risk associated with that. The government said, look, we know it's really risky. You can lose everything that you put into this. We're going to give you great tax benefits. These drilling costs or IDCs will offset your active income or capital gains, ordinary income. We're going to give you these tax benefits and these ongoing benefits to kind of reduce some of that risk. Well, obviously, drilling today is completely different than it was 100 years ago. And really it's different than it was, 25 years ago. When they started
still risky
drilling,
government. Keep those tax incentives coming.
they're still there. They've been there
Yeah.
around for decades and they're still in place. And so, but now we have horizontal drilling and fracking, which means not only do we go down, but then they go sideways and they're able to go in and frack these wells. And the recovery and success rates in these great areas is more than 90%. So the likelihood of drilling a dry hole is almost non-existent with these horizontal wells. So they've pretty much almost eliminated eliminated the risk of not being able to extract oil. I'm not going to say that the risk is gone because it's not. You can still drill, hit oil, but not be able to actually extract it from the ground. There are other issues that can come up, but the success rates are much, much higher. And when you're drilling with a, big company like Continental Resources in a proven area, the likelihood of having a dry hole is not very likely. So the risk has gone down significantly, but that stigma around drilling that and having spent millions of dollars it's been around for so long that it's going to take a while to kind of overcome that.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, there's still risks. And so you said a couple words that I want to make sure we outline for our listener. You said IDCs and fresh.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't even, it's like such a natural part of my vocabulary. But
Yeah.
so IDCs, that's tied into, your taxes that everybody loves. IDCs are what's called intangible drilling costs. And these are all of the costs that go into drilling a well that don't have any value later on. So it's like your fuel and your labor and your things that are not tangible that have no resale value later. And all of those expenses, which is a vast majority of the cost of drilling, are the IDCs. You get those as your active tax benefits, or you get a K1 loss the year that the well is drilled, which is awesome.
And that's usually like, I know, because full disclosure, we did a raise into your fund. It was the first time I had done a fund to fund. And I remember vetting you, and, asking people who had invested with you, who all sing your praise. I mean, they're just like, I've never met somebody who is a syndicator that communicates so well, and even in the good times and the bads. And I think that speaks to your character, Courtney, like tenfold, because there's so many times that like syndicators just want to put their head down and be like, let me just fix it before I have to tell somebody. And you're like, well, we're a little late this month, or this is happening, or this came out in the news. Don't worry about it. This is what it really means, which we all have to, I think, dissect the news these days, not getting into that. But so I really appreciated that. And the way you also make it accessible. So I want to really step into a little bit of the benefit of that, because you really are translating and allowing more people to get into oil and gas investing that either never thought they could or have wanted to, but they just don't know who to trust and who to go with. And
yeah,
the interesting part, I'm always an optimist, always. Everything can get done.
Me too.
Good. But then I'm always like a pessimist with the numbers. I'm like, okay, like show me it. So when we started going into the IDCs and that first year tax write-off, like I was blown away that like I had not found this tax, I would say present prior, because I do love good tax strategy and incentives and stuff like that. So speak a little bit to that part, because it's phenomenal. And quick story is I had a couple of my investors come to me towards the end of the year and is like, I have, you have weird questions when you're a syndicator and a developer, right? It was like, I had this weird tax event. I got this tax credits sold. I now, have X many hundreds of thousands of dollars now in a gain that I didn't realize. It's fourth quarter, right? And football analogy, right? Like your fourth quarter, 2-yard line, you're about ready to go to the tax. Like, what do I do? And I was like, well, you could do this, or we have this oil and gas opportunity. And we quickly educated them, shared the master class with them, and they're like, we're in. And to be able to say, that they're getting almost 90% of that in a write-off.
I can tell you it's actually going to be over 90. I actually confirmed that. You're going to get a new email today with, an update, and it is going to be over 90. And I actually have chills right now. Whenever we get to send out great news like that, it's the best feeling ever. And the fund has come for a couple of different reasons. It's kind of two-pronged. One is, all of the lessons that I have learned over the course of doing deals. And the other one was I had so many people that were like, I want to be able to bring this to my investors. How can I work with you? And so, the fund came for both of those reasons. And it's funny because a lot of people see this was Iron Horse Energy Fund 1 and they're like, are you brand new? Do you know anything about oil and gas? And, just to clarify, I don't have a full-time job. Like this is my full-time job. This is all I do all day long. Every day is wake up and read articles and look at what oil is doing and what's happening in Venezuela and what's going on with the shadow fleets and, what's happening. happening. And so I try to keep a pretty good pulse on that. But this strategy and why I'm so proud of this fund, and I'm so honored to have you guys in there with us. I think, I haven't shared a lot of this, but we have a lot of wells. It's really about diversification. And, you can be with the best operators out there. And one of the things that I've learned, I thought, oh, as long as we've got a great operator with a minimum of 4 wells, we've tweaked that every time. Like, you can still have slower production in those wells. And it was like, okay, how do we mitigate that? Well, we need more wells with more operators and more basins. And so really, that was one of the biggest reasons Iron Horse was even, created and founded, was so that we could bring a massive amount of diversification. I mean, I really, with my heart of hearts, believe that this is the best and smartest way to invest in working interests for any investor. And so really, for investors, gosh, it's really just having access, getting access and, knowing the people that can bring this to the table. And I always think about like, how do we reach more people? How can we help more people? And it's funny because when I started down this, it was like, okay, I can save taxes and create this and do this. And then it was like, gosh, I can do this for my family or my friends. And, now I'm on this like mission to save the world and keep it. My big, hairy, audacious goal is to keep
I was going to ask you,
dollars.
so bring it. Say it. What is it?
It is to keep $1 billion out of the hands of the IRS. That is my goal. I think right now we're sitting at somewhere around, 40 or 50 million. So I've got a long path to go on, but I feel like maybe $1 billion is not a big enough goal. Maybe we need to make it 5 billion. I don't know.
I have to take a side note on this because when I heard your goal, I was like, damn, that's next level. Like I'm not pushing myself enough. And those are the women I want to be around. Those are the rooms I want to be in. And it made me up my big, hairy, audacious goal to unlocking $100 billion in economic incentives for over 10,000 women business owners by 2045.
Okay, now you're making me feel like, dang, I'm gonna have to step up my game. I better get it together.
Well, and I think about and the other part is to create a $1 trillion ripple effect with economic. Yeah. And I think what your mission, it speaks to my heart too, because I don't want to say anybody, but right now you're seeing everybody have a fund oh, I have a fund. And my questions are always like, that's great. What are you investing in? Or where are you placing the money? And how are you vetting that? And those are some questions that some of them don't know. And so we talk about vetting, and I think that's where predominantly I see women either like trust with their heart and go in, and then hope, right, that like these people are nice, they're of integrity and their worth. But as you stepped into some deals, and we'll get to those scars in a minute, but like I've had bad deals and gone into deals that you trust somebody and they don't show up like how you show up. And so then you take your company and your brand and like, how do I give what I want? Right? How do I show up how I want? And I'm sure, and you're a Navy veteran, so one, thank you for your service. How has that, with your family history, with like your experiences, really shaped? Because you're talking about how you curate and you go out and you hunt, and I love that. Like, I call it hunting. I should say I hunt. Like, if I need a relationship, I call it a missing person report. If I need a missing person in my life, I'm like creating that hunt list and finding them. But with all those experience, how has that like allowed you to have that confidence to step in and operate in that way?
This is such a great question because, I think everything I've ever done for the most part has always been a pretty male dominated space. I was an aviation electronics technician in the Navy. So that is nothing but men. And for those of you that don't know what that is, all of the electronics in an airplane, if they broke, they would pull them out of the plane and send them to us to fix. Well, I worked in a shop of 80 guys and Courtney, and it was like that at North Island in San Diego. And when I got to the ship, it was like that on the ship, but I got put in charge of that shop because I was really good at what I did. I think I have this internal drive to just always be the best. I am very competitive. And in everything, I don't care if we're playing cards. I don't care if we're coloring. I don't care if we're raising capital. Whatever it is, I don't care. Like, even when my husband and I, this is how ridiculous I am. If we're in 2 different cars and we're driving home, I'm going to beat him home. Like, he's not going to, what is that? That's
insert Mr. and Mrs. Smith, like that section with their
yes. Oh my gosh. So
I do too. We may have that. Like,
I don't know if I've ever admitted that out loud, but I am. I'm a very competitive person, and so a lot of being in the military, I won a lot of awards. I got in there, and I always do. I want to differentiate myself. I want to stand out. The creases on my pants were going to be better than everybody else's creases when we had uniform inspections. It just, like I said, it didn't matter what we did, but I went in and reworked those manuals and all these things. So got a lot of awards. I was really good at it, but I was a single mom and I didn't see my kids for over a year, and that was tough. And I had to get out. And never in a million years did I think I would end up in investing this investment space. But investment's a very male dominated space. And then if you narrow that down even more, oil and gas, 100% is very much male dominated. There are some women here, but not very many. It's pretty few and far between. So, and it's a good old boy network.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what even your question was that you originally asked. I can't even remember what you asked me. What was the question?
It's more of like, how did these experiences,
Oh,
or
how'd they shape?
yeah, I want to say I definitely relate to you with the male dominated. I grew up with a construction family. So when you're saying like going to your daddy, we had Lester's Donuts when we were talking. That was the donut shop with all the boys, right? And like
Yes.
I know more about Peoria, that restaurant, than the donut shop than anybody else. But I think all those like curate your experience. And so where I was saying is like you're pulling, I mean, we all pull from our experiences, like you said. I mean, your competition, your family, the Navy. And how does that like show up in how you operate today?
Right. So I think, when I was in the Navy, I won a lot of awards for saving a lot of money and streamlining a lot of the processes. I'm always trying to figure out how to do things better. And I really enjoyed that recognition when I was in the Navy. I enjoyed being able to step in, and I was really good at what I did. And I had a production meeting every morning at 7 a.m. with every single head of every squadron that was on our boat. And we were at war. I spent all of 2003 in the Persian Gulf in response to 9/11. And so every bomb that got dropped came off my airplanes. And if the airplanes weren't flying, their main gear was sitting in my shop. So you talk about the pressure. And every morning, the commanders of these squadrons, I had a meeting with them every day. They're like, what's going on with my bird? When are you going to have us back in the air? And so, but I really enjoyed that. And I thrive in those scenarios. And I think obviously, oil and gas is not wartime, but I wanted to do good and do my part to make a difference. And I just have this, I guess, innate part of me that wants to do good and make a difference. And so, no matter what job I'm doing, and between the Navy and what I am doing now in oil and gas, I was a nurse. And it's funny, I always tell everybody I couldn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I just went out and did everything. I sold real estate. I was a nurse for a while, and I did all of the things. And I feel like I always was really good at everything I did because of that desire to always want to be great at what I did. I do have that natural drive. And I think that's something that comes naturally with entrepreneurs and things like that. We just have this natural drive to want to be great. When I got in this space, I did invest with a lot of people and lost a lot of money. It was really difficult. The very first thing I ever got involved with turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. And, that is something we can definitely talk about. But I also feel like through that experience of investing with others, I was like, man, I had this one apartment, complex I invested in for 9 months. I had no idea what was even going on with it. Like, did they finish the purchase? Like what's happening? I mean, there was no communication. So I was like, okay, I don't like this. I don't like that I have no idea what's going on. There was no information, there's no communication, and no transparency. And so that was really one of the basic foundations of what I want to do. I think probably sometimes maybe I communicate too much, maybe I over communicate, and I probably overshare. Does everybody need to know every little detail? I don't know, but I share a lot. And I want people to be confident in knowing, whether it's good or bad. I had to send an email out. We have some wells that are having a workover done and they're expensive, and we had to pause distributions while those are getting done. And that's, nobody wants to have to send that out. But, I also think that's also where a lot of the trust comes from, is that my investors know the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it looks like, I'm going to share it with them. I'm not going to withhold information, and we're going to go through it, and we're going to go through it together, and we're going to work our way through the deal, and it's all good. And at the end of the day, my investors are my number one priority. Always, 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 always. And I do everything with them in mind and how I want to be treated.
Yeah, I love that because there's so many times, and I've become, subject to it, where I'm just so heads down of trying to either fix the problem, work the problem, and one of my investors will come and be like, "Can we get an update?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's go." And then I started pivoting to, we do like hard hat happy hours. I mean, where like we'll have them walk through the construction site when it's all like, in progress, and so they can see it, because I would want to, like you said, come along for that experience. And so once I really realized that other people liked that, it was engaging them in different ways.
Sure.
And I think that's a big part, because then when stuff, let's just say, then when shit hits the fan, they know you're going to give it to them straight. It's not going to be something like we had, I'm thinking of like bend over moments where you're like, oh my gosh, how am I communicating this? Right? It's like, you can't believe that just happened. And we had a client, a tenant that moved out of like a food hall space, and it was a majority of the building, and the fit out from a restaurant food hall standpoint was insane. And it took us about a year to fill it. We are running on fumes, and communicating that with our investors are like, okay. And they start becoming advocates, like, okay, this person's looking, like, how do we, and you work with what you have. I think that people who are seasoned in this game appreciate that so much more than like oversharing, right? Of like, I don't need to
Yes.
know all the details, but like, then nothing, because that's when you get worried, like what is happening. And I think especially my brain can make up 50,000 stories in 1 second
Well,
about
we go straight to worst case scenario, right?
doom and
I
gloom,
mean,
doom and
that's
gloom. Yes.
that's absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's natural for us as humans. And but I think, no matter what the asset class is, I think at the end of the day, when you own assets, there's stuff that has to be repaired and things that happen and things that come up. It's natural. We had to put new pumps on some new wells, which sucks. They're expensive. It was like, dang, but we had kind of like a natural disaster happen and totally unforeseeable, but they're fixing it. It's costing a ton of money to do it, but it hasn't changed the long-term outlook of the project. But I think this is where how the operator and person managing it, how they deal with that and how they communicate, I think that's what really matters, because I think it's silly, no matter what asset class you're in, to think that everything is going to be 100% perfect 100% of the time. I mean, I don't care if it's your personal home, there's repairs that have to be made. If you're buying a building, do you want to stay at 100% occupancy? Yes, but let's be realistic. And anybody, I mean, I think you shouldn't go in with unrealistic expectations. And I think that is where I'm trying to do a better job, is managing expectations and saying, look, I mean, do we want everything to be 100% perfect all the time? That would be awesome. Is that realistic? Probably not.
Probably not. Yes. And I also love, so when you say 100%, I never show investors, and my investors that are listening to this are laughing because they know I won't show over 90% occupancy ever. And they're like, but I'm like, somebody's always moving out or moving in, or like there's like, no, because the second you see that 100%, that's the baseline, right? Like,
Nobody is ever going to see any other number besides that ever.
no.
Well, in like our deal right now where we're having to swap pumps out, everybody's like, when are distributions going to start again? And I'm like, look, I just sent out an email this morning that said, hey, all the pumps have been swapped out. Everything is back online. They're going to start selling oil again this month, but we're going to need a little bit of data to see how these wells are producing before we can even give an estimate. And I said, and I don't want to give an estimate until then, because if I say, hey guys, we think it's going to be April, and then if it's not April, everybody is going to be upset. And so I was like, until we have more data, I don't even want to speculate around this, because as soon as you say it, that is what everybody, it doesn't matter anything else that gets said. So
Yeah. And I think that when we talk about like the vetting questions and the vetting criteria, and how do you go into these different deals about like, what questions do you ask? And as we talked about, I think we want to jump into the scars and some of those deals now, because one, I always learn so much from myself and how I go into it. It adjusts my questions. But I think if somebody is selling you that, like, oh, if it's 100%, then like the rosy color,
run,
like run. Yeah,
run.
run. Because then I always ask, like, tell me your worst deal. And I think it was maybe the first or second call that we had together. I was like, what's the worst deal you've ever been in? And you dropped the bomb, and I was like, that's horrible. Like, and what did you learn from that, right? And it
Mhm.
makes me think like, again, I usually, I don't like to do the 506 reg DC, right? Where it's the public one and you can take anybody because I don't want to be in business with just anybody. I want
Sure.
to be in business with people that I know, like, and trust, and they know how things are going to flow. And so,
Well, and I will tell you, when we opened this first fund up, the goal was $100 million, and we had well over $100 million committed. But I want to be aligned with the right people for the right reasons, and we did not hit that 100 million mark because I had somebody that wanted to bring me $15 million, and I turned them away. There are people that have not good reputations and things like that, and that's just not who I want to be aligned with. And it's more important to me to be partnering with the right people for the right reasons than to just, could I have left it open and taken all the money just for the sake of taking the money? Yeah, but I'm trying to build something really meaningful, and not just to me, but for my investors. And I want to be proud of who I'm partnered with. And the relationships matter. And I don't think I knew how much they were going to matter until, like I said, when I first got in this space, I was aligned with all the wrong people and I didn't know it because to me, I'm such an optimist. Everybody's great. And, until they proved me wrong. And I had to kind of take a step back because that's not how everybody else is. And I really had a hard time with that because, these pumps that we had to swap on that one deal, like I've lost sleep over that. It's
I
not
can
the end of the
imagine.
world. It sucks. We're going to fix it. This is going to be, it doesn't impact my outlook on the project. It just sucks that we've had a setback and I lose sleep over that. It affects me to my core. And so I just don't know how people can manipulate others and steal and put bad deals together. It's mind boggling to me. It really is. And I never in a million years thought that I would be thankful for the millions of dollars that were lost, but I am because had I not gone through that experience, it wouldn't have forced me to find a way to do things better. It showed me what I didn't know and what needed to change. And I am building that. Am I perfect? No. I am always sitting back going, okay, how do I do this better? How do I communicate better? As an investor, what do I want? And how do I bring that to the table for my people? So I'm always trying to do better. And I think we do a pretty good job. I mean, always room for improvement. And I'm excited. I'm really proud of what we've built. I'm proud of that.
I love that. Love that. And you can hear in your voice, it's like, like I don't want to be that person. And believe me, that food hall, I can't even talk now. I'm so stuttered with it. But like, I can't tell you how many nights of sleep I lost on that. Like, and I'm still pretty much losing sleep as we're getting it back on track. But I think it's great what you even said. I mean, a lot of that is great. But what I hone in on is saying no to money and being thankful for it because those people show up in different places as pain points and can tackle you even if they're on your team, right? The small business investor or the small investors have so many rights that I think people who don't, again, study the game and how you go into it, that one, they can make your life hell from like all the audits and everything they can do. But also, like, is it worth it at the end of the day? Like, is the cost worth the price?
No, and I have one very specific person that I actually had somebody send me several videos that were published about this person, and I just, I had another syndicator. They were like, "You should just take their money," and I was like, "I am good." I realize I know the quality of the deal I'm bringing to the table. I am very confident in that, and funds that are bringing capital from investors, I'm not part of their funds, and I'm not managing that, but I also know that they are deploying capital into something that is good. And I feel great about that. But I don't have any control over how they manage their communications and what they're doing with their investors. And if there's all this bad stuff going on, I don't want my name associated with that. I've worked really hard to kind of come out of the ashes of that Ponzi ordeal and, really change the way, really do things differently. And I will never knowingly walk back into something like that on purpose again. I'm very, very intentional about that.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right, especially, and I think that's a risk that people aren't putting enough value on when you do a fund to fund. And I was actually talking with one of my clients who we're looking to do a raise for one of her projects. She has a bourbon bourbon business.
I love
And
that.
oh, she's a badass woman. You guys got to connect. We got to connect,
Ah,
dude. She's awesome. She didn't want these guys investing in her company, and they kept coming in and saying, "I want to invest. I want to invest." And it was actually the Boeing CFO, walked her through like, "How let's do this barrel club." And like Jack Daniels does it. There's only actually five distilleries in the United States that do it, and she's one of them. And I think she's the only female like owned one.
love it.
She's badass. And so she's doing a ranch expansion project. And so I referenced your deal and your structure a couple of times to her. I said, I love how she's doing this together because when you have a good product, right? When you have a good product, when you have a good brand, people want to get into your business. They want to own you. They want to buy you. And buying business is hot right now. We're not on that campaign right now, but that's where people think, and they think, oh, I can invest in a business, but I don't really have to do anything or this. And what I work with women business owners really to own the ground they stand on and they build their business on is don't bring your investors or bring investors into the business because you still want to own that brand and those operations, bring them into the real estate side. And this is how we're structuring it. We go into that in incentives. And I liked that, like how you set up of like the fund to fund, right? Where it's like, yeah, you manage your circus, right? And then I'm going to manage the ringleaders, is kind of how I put it.
Yeah.
But I like that because then it's up to them if they don't pass that communication on, right? I mean, you make it super easy. Like I'm always skeptical going into any deal, but like I had vetted you. I had vetted the people you work with and like had invested with you and asked some of them. And it was like, you know what? She's going to give you it straight. She's going to give it to you good, bad. And again, I feel like it's that reverse deal flow. It helps other people help you when you are
Right.
open, as opposed to like beat yourself up about it. And we all beat ourselves up in a second, but the way you structured that to have that limited exposure of your brand with the control of that was really good. I feel like we've teased a little bit about some of the scar stories, so let's step in. Let's go deep dive into that. What was, I would say, your worst deal you've ever been in, and what went wrong? Kind of like, what are the lessons you learned? If you need a minute,
Gosh. Oh, well,
therapy session after.
there's definitely been a lot of lessons along the way. And I think
Mhm.
that's what is so important. I never thought, and I don't know if you've read The Gap and the Gain. It's
Oh yeah.
probably one of my favorite books
Mhm.
because no matter how good or bad a situation is or the experience, there's great positive things to take from it. Now, when you are in the trenches, it is really hard to see the light and to see the positive. Actually, it's impossible.
Yeah.
But my first deal that I ever got involved in turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. We'll just throw that out there right off the bat. And I got involved with a group. I was invited to come and speak. I'm going through this diversification and investment. I'm exploring all these things. And I was asked to come and speak on a panel with Robert Kiyosaki. And I actually didn't even know who he was. I was like, okay, Robert Kiyosaki, Peter Schiff, G. Edward Griffin. And so I'm Googling these people. And then I was like, I figured out who they were. And I was like, oh gosh. And then I was really intimidated. And I thought, I'm just going to go do it. And I'll never forget my armpits sweat the whole time I was on this stage. And I had G. Edward Griffin and Robert Kiyosaki off to my right. And the panel was called What is Money? And they're asking questions and I'm answering. And I can see both of them shaking their heads. And I'm like, okay, they're agreeing with me. This is great. And so sorry for the sidebar, but I was this girl that was new to this space. And I'm like, how did I get a seat at this table? Like, this was a pretty amazing table, right? And
Yeah.
I had put all of these people up on this pedestal, right? And I joined this mastermind and I'm just like listening to all the stuff that these people are doing. And I'm like, I'm Courtney and I'm here. I think we all struggle with limiting beliefs. I struggled with a lot. And I guess in my mind, I don't feel like I really hadn't earned a spot at that table, I guess you could say. And so anyway, one of the groups there was raising for this oil and gas deal, and they were like, "Do you want to be a part of it?" And I was like, "Yes." They're explaining it to me. I understood it. Like everything made sense. The first raise was $1.4 million, and I'm like, "I am in." And I thought, "Where in the hell am I going to get $1.4 million? I have no investor list, no, nothing." Well, fast forward a little bit, did a couple of those $1.4 million deals. And in early 2023, they were like, look, we can get you 6 pieces of equipment instead of 2. It's a $5.4 million raise. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. Build it. We had $11 million in soft commits in 48 hours for that $5.4 million deal. It was crazy. The taxes were great. The income was great, but there was a whole handful of things happened and it sent me down this rabbit hole. And I was like, something is not right because of my experience in oil and gas. Like the reports we were getting weren't right. A lot of the stuff was supposedly under an NDA. And anyway, I came up with this laundry list and I was like, look, I need A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I was like, if we don't get this, we're terminating this deal and we won't be moving forward. And, long story short, ended up
wait time out for a second, Courtney. For that 1.4 million raise, did you go out and get other people to invest with you, or was that just your money? Okay, so you had other people in the game. Okay.
Yeah, brought people into the game, so we did 3 $1.4 million deals and I invested in them. My partner invested in them. She invested significantly more than I did. And, she was a doctor, needed those tax benefits and, the tax benefits were 2x your investment. So it was a big deal. So if you invested $100,000, you got a $200,000 K1 loss that was good against active income in year 1 or your W-2. So it was a big deal and the income was great. And all of it made sense, but I'm going down these rabbit holes and I'm like, this is not right. They're not giving this. And the whole we're under an NDA wasn't working for me anymore. I was like, I would like a copy of the NDA. And I was like, and then, they were supposedly working with Exxon. I was like, I want a letter from Exxon that says that, they can't disclose the terms with you, but they are in fact working with you and they do have your equipment deployed to their fields. And then I turned around and I pulled the county list of every natural gas well that Exxon had, and I pulled a Google photo of every single one of them and couldn't find a single bit of that equipment deployed to any one of those wells. So it was...
Okay. Hold on. So you just said a lot there.
I did.
So I want to let our listeners know that when you're saying you pulled up a list, like they're publicly listed, right?
Oh, yeah. Oil and gas information is very public. It is federally regulated and it's all very public, very public. So anything that's shared in oil and gas is very easily verifiable. And even the ownership interests are recorded at the county, just like real estate is. So everything is verifiable. And I do try to share a lot. I try to teach people how to check that out so they can verify that what they're buying into or investing in is accurate.
Yeah, and I think you gave us like a website, like here's where you can go and you can check all this out. And I was like, okay. So I love it. So now you are saying, okay, like let me call your yes.
Yeah.
Like
so I'm like, okay, I can't find there's no equipment. Anyway, that $5.4 million deal, I was like, we're out. I terminated it. My partner, I had 2 other partners, and one of my partners was like, I don't want to terminate. And I was like, I'm out. So we terminated, sent the money back to our investors that we had collected to that point. And, I sent an email out and said, look, I've requested all this stuff. They're not giving it to us. Until we get this documentation, we won't be moving forward with this deal any longer. And so, at that point in time, I had questions and concerns, but I didn't know everything for sure. Sent the money back, and 5 weeks later, I got a call from our attorney that they had been raided by the FBI and the SEC and their assets frozen and all kinds of stuff. And
oh my gosh.
I can't even tell you. I knew it was coming. I hoped I was wrong. I really hoped I was wrong, but I knew it was coming, but I hoped I was wrong. You know what I mean? Like it was one of those. Yeah. And
I hope I'm not right.
I really hope I'm wrong. Yeah. I really hope I'm not right. And so, but I knew something wasn't going on. So I was recording conversations. I kept very good documentation about everything I was researching. And I actually turned all of that over to the SEC too. But I got a lot of pushback through that. And that was really hard because here I am in this space of really big names that are all touting this investment, even after it was known that there were problems. And you've got Courtney waving a red flag and they're like, who the heck is Courtney? And they were really ugly to me. They were like, if you leave, you could never come back. And I got left to stand on that platform pretty much on my own. Some of the other people raising capital were like, hey, ask this question, but they weren't willing to ask it themselves. Like they were not willing to stand up and demand it, which was frustrating. So finally, the attorney that was working on the deal came up and said, hey, not only do I want everything Courtney's asking for, but I want this, and this on top of it, or I'm not doing any more of the docs anyway. And I just remember I just started crying, and it wasn't a cry like a sad cry. It was like a release because I
Release.
finally had somebody that was publicly standing with me and demanding the stuff I was demanding. And so it turned out it definitely is a Ponzi scheme. It's still under investigation today,
Oh
still.
my gosh.
They have recovered, it's been years and they've recovered, a lot of the money. They're still recovering stuff. I'm really proud of standing my ground the way that I did because I
Yes.
caught a lot of flack for it. And I guarantee you the next time I wave a red flag, people will 100% pay attention. And so I'm proud of how I handle it. But, I lost money in that deal. So did my partner, my friends and I mean, I have a good friend of mine that, I mean, she lost millions. I mean, it was
Mm.
devastating. They raised like $400 million or some atrocious amount.
Oh my gosh.
This was significant. And the man that was running this sat on our Department of the US Energy Board. Like he was an attorney, he was the mayor of his town. Like there were patents out there. Like the people that, and I don't think it started out as a Ponzi scheme. I think he got into hot water and that's where it went. But he had built a lot of the equipment. I think he just couldn't get it to work. And Exxon said that they had tested the equipment. It just wasn't where it needed to be. So I don't think it started off with that intent, but that's where it ended up. And I even had investors that were like, there is no way. I vetted the crap out of this. There is no way. And I'm like, it is. But I sat in a hotel room for 2 days and I picked up the phone and I called each one of those investors one by one. And I have the most amazing group. I mean, I was shaking and they were just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for you. What can I do to help you? And I'm like, I'm calling to tell you I lost your $100,000 and you're asking what you can do for me. I mean, it was pretty incredible. And I was terrified to bring the next deal to the table. And I didn't for a while because I had PTSD from that. And I still do. But I gained 20 pounds and I didn't get out of bed for a week. But it was awful and it's still awful, but I'm very much a solution oriented person. And once I stopped having my pity party and, stopped whining and crying and being angry, and I was like, stopped focusing on what happened and said, okay, what am I going to do about it? This is what's happened. This sucks. What am I going to do about it? And when I started focusing on the solution, gosh, things have just changed and gotten better. And it's not a conversation I want to hide or shy away from. I think it's an important experience. I learned a lot through it. I learned a lot through other investments that I've done. And I don't want to see other people make those same mistakes. And so I'm just on this mission to share that and share the red flags and, share all the things. Because if I can keep one other person from walking into something bad like that, then God, that's amazing. It makes me feel really good about that.
I love that. I love it. And one, thank you for sharing that. And I wanna go deep a little bit because I'm gonna actually send this personal link to this person because I know she's going through it right now and she's listening. She's like, you're talking about me, Katie. I'm like, I am. So, okay, you said, I want to rewind that. You were in a hotel room, you were making these calls to the investors, telling them that you had lost their money. And I've had to do that. Like there's one deal, it was out of my wheelhouse. It was a restaurant deal, which, especially in real estate, they always tell you don't go in the restaurant deal. But the partners I was with at the time, I had faith, like you said, like I think the intention was good going in. But at the end of the day, like a spade's a spade. End of the day, the money is gone. We lost that money and I had to make that phone call. And I remember my partner wanted to send it in an email. I'm like, absolutely not. Like I have relationships with these people and
Yeah.
this is their money, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a distinct, decision that you picked up the phone, the 800-pound gorilla, right? And like called them.
Hands shaking, terrified.
Oh, when you talk about sweat, I think I like had to change my shirt halfway through those calls. And I was actually leaving the next day for a trip with my son that I'd planned for like 2 years. And so there was all the mom guilt about that too, like on top of everything else. But like, how did you mentally talk to yourself before you picked up that phone?
You know, um, I was at Fund Launch Live in Miami, and I go in and I'm like, I can't even sit at this conference. Like made my list of people, and I had to sit there, and all my friends, they had like rented a tent down on the beach, and they're having like meetings down there, and I couldn't even focus. But I had to talk myself into it, and it was like, okay, I've got to do this. And I was terrified because that is the worst phone call to ever have to make to
Oh,
somebody.
worst.
And I think, when I called, like I said, my hands were shaking, my voice is shaking. I'm trying not to cry. And I'm just like, look, I've got some horrible news I need to share. This is what has happened. And I'm like, look, I've never been through this. I don't know what this is going to look like moving forward, but just know I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to be here for you. We're going to figure this out together. And everybody, I think out of all of those people, and it might have been 50 people that I had to call, I had one person that was kind of yelling at the beginning, but by the end, he was like, okay, even he kind of came around, so I felt really good about that and how those calls went. I think people just want to know that you're there and that you're not going to leave them. And I've actually adopted so many other investors that invested in that deal through other people, but those people have never communicated anything to them. And I communicate everything I find out. And so they're like, hey, can you add me to your distribution list for that? And I'm like, absolutely. So anything
Yeah.
new that comes out. So my list of people I'm emailing that information to is like doubled just because I've adopted other people just to kind of keep them apprised of what's going on. And a lot of people don't do that. It's really unfortunate because this is people's livelihoods. These are their dollars that they worked for. And it's funny, I'm going to read something to you that I have a guy that helps me create materials and stuff. And I'm really looking at how I'm going to build out who I allow to come and participate in these funds with me. And the line I came up with was, I don't recruit capital raisers, I qualify stewards. And I want to know that people care about the money that they're taking from other people. They're going to be a good steward of that money. And I think that's been lost somewhere along the way, and it matters to me. And I think what my investors know and understand is that when I tell people, I'm like, I promise I really do care. Everybody says that, everybody does, but I
Mhm.
really do. And I think people, when we chat, they know that I am genuine and I do mean what I say when I say it. And so, like I said, I'm not perfect. My deals don't go 100% perfect all of the time, but I guarantee you one thing, if something goes sideways, we're going to figure it out and we're going to find a way to solve the problem. And I'm not going to leave my people in the process.
I love that. I love it. And I think that's what people want at the end of the day. Like especially when you get into oil and gas, right? And I see a lot of women try and get into this area of raising money and funds. And I love what you said, being a good steward of it, because I always say own your craft. Like whatever that is, own your craft, like study it, dissect it. I remember when I was trying to learn, I mean, I grew up in construction, real estate development. I was around it all the time. But when you're on the deal side, it's different. And I remember literally like I walked with Chuck around like the parking lot because that was his morning walk just to be able to pick his brain and like, tell me your worst deal, tell me your best deal. And again, student of the game. And I think it's risky when you do have those larger raises and when you do have other people, like you said, bring it in. One of the conversations I had with one of my clients was like, well, what if we create, because there was an investor that was like, their ethics are not in alignment and I don't want to take their money, but it's an investment. I was like, we'll create a code of conduct or create a code of ethics for your investors and where, like they have to sign off on it. Right. And if we find you're in violation, we can pull your investment, like, and you lose everything. We don't care. We'll just like literally pay you back out your principal and you're done. And we're kind of working through that.
I
And
actually kind of like that, but I'm like, what does that look like?
that's what we're stepping into where it's like because the questions then come up is like, okay, if they cheated on their husband, is that I mean, like it's kind of gone down a little path, but that path is now bringing this really good clarity and this set of standards where people are now like, wait, what, it's almost like the VIP entrance, right? It's like, wait, I
Okay, we're
got
going to have to talk about this. I have like so many ideas and other things that I have swirling around, but I think, yes, that's another conversation, but I really like that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because you always try and side list problems, right? And it's how do I have this, how do I not create another problem, but create a solution and all that. So no, we'll definitely circle back because you've been inspiring me of going into deals. And that's what I've been craving for is to go into other deals with people that I know and I trust and I like their character of how they show up. Because to me,
Right.
I don't need sunshine and rainbows. I want to know how you show up in the trenches. Like
Yep.
that's it. And a lot of people haven't gotten past, I got to say, I have three questions that I vet everybody before you send me the docs. I'm like, if you don't get past those three questions, don't even send me the docs. Like, I don't want to know
Right.
because
Right.
I don't trust you. I just don't trust you. But I definitely appreciate that. So I want to get back on track because I know we're running a little long here,
I
but
know. I'm sorry.
no, no, I always tell listeners like I don't have that like 30 minutes, whatever. Like I want the content. I want the good. Hit pause, come back, walk the dog tomorrow, listen to it. Let's go. But we've talked about the scars. And one, I wanna make sure we hit this one question because this is one I know a couple of my friends and a couple of my clients are dealing with. When you have that, I'm gonna say like kick in the gut, you're bent over, like, how do I recover from this moment? You're in the hotel room making those calls, tough calls. How did you get back in the game?
Yes, well, I can tell you that it took a little while. I mean, it took a couple of months of me. I gained 20 pounds. I had a 1 week where I didn't get out of bed and I was angry and I was frustrated and I was embarrassed. And not only did I lose my money, which was awful, but I was responsible for losing other people's money, which there are literally no words for that. But then
Horrible. Yeah.
kind of the final gut punch was people that I loved and trusted. It's like they had stabbed me in the back and were twisting the knife. It was kind of like this three-way. It was awful. It was really, really awful. And that's another conversation for another time. But like I said, I sat here and wallowed in my little pity party for quite some time and I whined and complained and pointed fingers, and it was the shift. It was that shift I brought up earlier. I was like, okay, you know what? I don't want my kids to see this. Like, this is not the kind of example I want to set for my kids. Like, this has happened. This really sucks, but this is also not who I am. So I was like, okay, this has happened. What's the solution? What do I do? How do I do this better? What do I need? What's the answer? And so I really started going down that path. And it lit a fire under me. I was excited to get going. So I was like, okay, I need this landman. And, how do I prevent this from happening again? And how do I do this? And so I just started building and putting together the holes that I saw before and creating something better. And I'll never forget the very first webinar I was doing after all that had happened. I'm like, my heart was racing. I had so much anxiety around it because I'm like, I've raised money for this deal that ended up being a Ponzi scheme. And now I'm bringing another one to the table. What are my investors going to think? And, it was and I had so many conversations with them. I had one guy reach out and I was like, I was really scared to talk to you. And he was like, Courtney, he was like, I knew that there was, risk here. And he was like, you handled it beautifully. And he was like, there's a reason that people have to be accredited and they have to be this, there's a reason for all that. And he was like, I knew and understood that. And I signed off on it. And he was like, and I'm here for it. And so it just more and more of those conversations happened. And then when I brought that deal and some of those people that had lost money in that reinvested with me, I was blown away. Totally blown
Right.
away. And that
Yes.
made me feel amazing. And I think because I felt like I was kind of walking on eggshells, but that gave me a lot of confidence. And then, I'd never really talked about it. And so once I then started talking and sharing, and it's funny, I was at Hunter Thompson's Raise Masters retreat. I had joined his group and he had brought me on stage just to ask me what I thought about Capital Collective. And one of the other things that was really powerful, they say that the people you surround yourself with matters. Jim Rohn say
Mhm.
you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I never really appreciated how important that was until I was going through this. And the people that I had surrounded myself with, because I was ready to quit. I was done with raising capital and managing deals. And they were like, Courtney, they were like, you are exactly the person that needs to be in this business. They were like, this is impacting you so much because you care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't have lost sleep. Your hands wouldn't be shaking. All of these things wouldn't be there. They're like, you are exactly who needs to be in this space. And I had never talked about it with other people. And Hunter brought me up to talk about that. But Hunter was one of those people that was a big supporter of me of, hey, get back on the horse. Hunter and Michael Flied. And, I had this handful of people that were my cheerleaders, and they were the ones that did not let me quit. And I'm so grateful to them. And I got on that stage, and that was what I ended up talking about. I'm like, this is what I just went through. I lost all this money and lost investor. And I'm up there in tears crying. And I'm like, this is what I've gotten out of this Capital Collective group and what they have done for me. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm up there to talk about the group. And that's where I went. And I was really blown away when I walked off that stage. I had so many people coming up to me and they were like, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going through this or I'm going through that. And I was kind of taken aback by how many things other people were dealing with, and they were too scared or embarrassed to share it. I was horrified. I was embarrassed because nobody wants to stand on a stage and admit that you lost millions of dollars. Everybody stands up there and acts like they are the kings of the world and everything's perfect. And I just thought, I had another investor. They were like, you need to share this story. They're like, what you did through this deal and the way you stood your ground and the way you protected your investors' capital in that $5.4 million deal. They're like, you need to embrace that and share that. They were like, it's a big deal. And so I decided to just make it a part of my story. Like, it is part of my journey. It's part of who I am. And I am proud of how I handled it. The deal sucked. The situation sucked, but I am proud of how I handled it. I can absolutely hold my head up high with how I did stand my ground. And it has helped shape where and who I am today. And I am very proud of that.
So, well, I appreciate you for sharing that, because I know even listening to this and the listeners is like, there's many people that have been burned. And like you said, they're stand up on the stage and they're like, I did this, I've raised this. It's like, oh, it's so easy. It's so great, shiny object. And I remember even my coach was like, you need to talk about this. I'm like, I can't tell people I failed. Like, that's not my DNA. That's not how I was raised.
Yeah.
And you don't fail, and I have found that in talking about it, people understand, like, how do I look at a deal? How do I go into it? What are the things, you kind of have on the radar? And like you said, you're constantly learning because every deal is different. Every deal has new terms and new conditions and all that, but it is how you show up. And I think that is where I worry when people do these big funds and this and that, they don't have enough experience
Right.
to vet that and to call the red flag and to wave the red flag, because they're being fed something and they're just
Well,
passing that on. They don't know how
it's
to
because they don't know what they don't know. Some of
Yep.
them, I mean, there's a whole handful of things that go into that. And
Yeah.
so, which is actually why I chose to stay in my lane, is because I was so overwhelmed with some of these other things. I'm like, I don't even know what to ask, or I don't even know where I could get bit. And so, yeah, it's, I'm way overly cautious now. It's probably to the point of ridiculousness, but, we'll work through that and get through it.
It's the guardrails of the PTSD is what I say. It's the
Yes.
guardrails of that, so you
Yes.
don't do it again. No. And I think a lot of women especially like get burned in those situations. And it took me a while. And then I was even, you mentioned it, surprised when I call those investors to invest in this next opportunity when I know I've lost them that money. Like, do I call them? And then, there was a point where I was like, you know what, Katie, they want options. They know the risk. Like when your mentor said, like, they know the risk. Give them that opportunity. They can say yes or no,
Yeah.
and to my surprise, as you experienced too, is like, you're like, yeah, let's do this. And I'm like, okay. You almost like taken back. It's like, wait, what? Like,
Yes.
you understand what I was asking you? And they're like, yeah, because of how you showed up, right? Because of like
Yes.
you were front with us, you were communicating. And I think a lot of times that, like you said, the character and how you show up is how, what they want to be a part of. And
Yes.
because they're busy with their own life, they're busy doing their job or investing in their thing, and they don't have time to sit and watch everything as that closely too. So they are depending on you as the
Yeah.
sponsor in there.
100%. Yes.
Yep. So let's talk about like a little bit about that due diligence and that decision clarity. So when you got back on the horse, and was the next deal you did one of your own? Was that
Yes.
you're like, I'm creating this?
Yep. Yep. And I have raised, yes. So I was like, I am going to do my own deals because I know that I have purchased that deal. And, I used to borrow money from investors to go out and buy these interests. And I'm like, here, guys, like, here's, the wire receipt that shows that I paid for it. Here's, the invoice that I paid. Like, I used to do these short-term notes and everybody was like, God, your level of transparency is awesome. And it was like, okay, so I've only done my own deals and raised capital for my own deals over the course of this last few years. And so I don't know that I'll ever raise money for other stuff. I don't know. I don't want to say never, because there are some pretty cool things out there, but actually know that I have a control issue. And it's a
I don't see
control
any control problem.
and it's kind of with everything. And so I like that I know that I am buying this stuff. I'm paying for it. I'm getting the documents. I know it's mine. I think it gives me a peace of mind and that I know the deal might produce slower or might produce over more, however it goes or however it actually works out. I know that we went out and bought it and I'm bringing the right things to the table. I know that. And I'm going to manage it the right way. So I think that gives me, a peace of mind. And yeah, so
And that's a good way to step into it, right? So you got burned, you're scarred for sure. I mean, scorched earth there, right, with that. And how do you start to build back, right? And I love it. If you're not investing in somebody else, I want to control the things that did not work and that were, not above board and get into the game. And I appreciate that because that's, I think, the next baby step. You have
right.
to rip the Band-Aid off and say, okay, with eyes wide open, what didn't work? How can I build a system or process around that or people in place that can fix that? And then how am I showing up differently and setting that tone and arriving how I want to
Yeah.
arrive with integrity? And I
Yep.
think you do an amazing job at that. So
Oh, well, thank you. I
yeah.
appreciate that very
Yes.
much.
Well, and even like I said, our investors, when I first got into this, and my investors know, again, I like to vet everything. And I feel like the nerd in me loves the like, there's always more to vet. There's always like, okay, now next time do this, do that. And with oil and gas, I was bluntly honest with them. I'm like, I'm learning this at the same time, guys. Like, I've wanted to get into this industry, I've wanted to learn it. And they were like really, grateful for that. And
Yeah.
like, that's when we had asked you, like, can we do a master class in investing in oil and gas so we could start to talk about like the terminology and all that. And I think that that's important too. So you can kind of get a feel. And it was the first time that, because I normally do real estate or development investments where we have these projections, like we talked about, 90% the highest one. Usually we step into that over 5 years, but we didn't put a pro forma out. And I remember my investors being like, why? It's like, well, we can't tell you what that cost of oil or gas is going to be like that day or when it sells or that stuff. But you have a calculator that really kind of said, if it's this, it's that. And I appreciated that because again, you weren't telling them like, we hope it's this, we hope it's that. It's going to be whatever the market's going to be. And
Mhm.
here's going to be your return. The one things we do know about is that tax write-off, right? Is like that
Yeah.
we know we can deploy this. And my heart, I mean, I think I probably texted you, if not every day in December. I probably bulked up a couple days not to text you every day, and you were right on it because I was like, are we going to be able to deploy by the end of the year? We could, like, I'm just sitting here, like, almost offering my help when I have no idea what to do, right? Just, do you need me to bring, and it's that, right? It was, I mean, your team was on it and you were so calm. You're like, nope, we already got deployed. We already got 24 over here and this. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yes.
It was great confidence. And again, the communication, getting those emails pretty much weekly, I found is been educating me. My investors appreciate it. They love their write-off, right? And now they're asking, how do we invest more? So more to come on that, hopefully. But as we kind of wrap up a little bit here, because I think we could probably go off on many, many tangents, which
Oh,
will
we could. I feel
I
like we could do this all day. We could have like a whole all day like episode where we just talk. We could be what's his name that Joe Rogan where he's got like his 4 hour podcast. I feel like we could totally do a whole 4 hour like episode very
I totally
easily.
could. Yeah, I think we could. I think we could. And it'd be good. It'd be like cliffhanger, right? Because you're just like,
Yeah.
because it is, I always go back to the scars because I find it so interesting. I grew up playing sports. I grew up a big tomboy. I didn't ever worry about failing because it was like, pick yourself up and do it again, pick yourself up and do it
Yeah.
again. But when you take on somebody else's money, the psychology for me that changed was intense. Like if I
Yeah.
lose my money, I know the equation, I know how to make money. I can do it again. And so
Yeah.
I feel that that was such a like an unlocking that like I think you can't talk about that enough. You just can't because
No, and I have been
overcoming
on
it.
this mission. I'm like, nobody can ever guarantee a return. And if they do, you should run from that deal. But I'm like, okay, how do I create something where I can guarantee that they won't lose their capital they invested? How do I build
Mm.
that? So that's what I'm really focused on right now. I'm like, do we integrate insurance? Do we, anyway, I'm just, I've got all these different ideas spinning around my head and I will figure it out. I promise you, if anybody can figure it out, it's going to be me and I'm going to
I
find a way.
I
But
believe that. Well,
I
and
just,
oops, sorry, you do things that like I always call myself a safety girl in the waterfall. So when I saw you're like, we're putting this much over here for reserve and this much over here, I was like, oh, she's my spirit animal. Like, because I will talk about we're gonna do this, then we're gonna hit the reserve to this amount, then we'll do this, then we'll hit the reserve. People are like, how much reserve? I'm like, enough. A year. Like I want to be able to float all of our
yeah.
expenses for a year in that reserve. And
Well, and here's, I think something that is different about the way we do things. We did put that reserve aside, but like my other project where we had to put these other wells in, I think what people don't realize is that, even though those wells went offline so that they could do all this work, the bills don't stop. And
mm-mm.
I tell everybody from the get-go, we will cover whatever costs come in and we will not pass that on as a capital call to our investors. We never have and we won't. And I think, those bills have continued to come even though those wells have been offline for a couple of months now and we have covered those costs and not passed it on. I mean, it sucks that we haven't done distributions, but we also, everything that we buy, we stand behind. Not only do we invest, but we stand behind that project in that not only do we believe that those other pumps are going to fix that and we have covered that cost, and not passed it on as a capital call. So the only way that we're going to recoup not only our investment, but the money that we are now laying out to cover those additional expenses is if those wells are going to perform. So we are backing that not only in more ways than one, I guess you could say. And I think, the accounting costs and everything else don't stop, just because the wells have gone offline. I think bringing some of that information to light is important as well because I don't know of any other managers that do that and will cover it with their own dollars before they'll pass it on to their investors.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even on our side, I was like, we want to fund because, I'm reading the fine print, right? Well, this may be a cost, it may be, it could be, and you're clear about that. And so, even we have another safety net in that fund to go into
Yeah.
your fund. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate how that goes into it. And like you were saying with, yes, we're not making those distributions, but we're also not given a capital call, right? And
Right.
it's like,
Right.
that's like not great, but like really not great, right? And those are not fun questions are, to conversations to call and ask and everything like that. So as we start to kind of wind down, because we will do part two, we will. And so listeners are probably like, wait, we're not done yet. And so I want to kind of switch to like what are when you vet, and I know you're doing a lot of your deals now, but even when you're vetting like the wells, the operators, everything like that, all the pieces that go into it, like what are like your three, like I have three go-to vetting questions. What are your top three questions or three things you must have to engage with somebody?
So, and I would say we probably have like five. Like I have just kind of a base, like we get a ton of oil and gas working interests that come across our desk every week. And then we have a team of landmen that are out hunting stuff down for us too. And so really right off the bat, it has got to be a top operator in a top producing basin. So we are not out doing exploratory drilling in hopes of finding oil in some random place. We are drilling in proven areas. So it's got to be a top operator and for a whole bunch of reasons that I won't go into. So top operator, top basin. The next thing I look at is the acquisition cost. It's got to be below a certain percentage or else we're not going to hit the tax benefits, so it's got to be this kind of operator in this kind of basin. Our acquisition price has to be here and it's got to be a minimum of a 2x return at $65 oil or we're not moving forward. So if we can't meet our tax criteria, acquisition price, return, operator and location, we're out. We won't even dig into all the other stuff.
I love it. I love it. And that is 3 to 5, right? Like it's got to be on that like boom, 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 boom. And you know it because you just rattled it off, right? And
Yeah.
it's that. And those are the go, no go. And I find like when you bend that criteria, nothing good happens. Like stick to the criteria, keep the guardrails on, and just
Yeah.
and keep building that better system, like you said. I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what, as a wrap up, what would be a final piece of advice to anybody as an investor looking to get into oil and gas and to step into into this industry?
I think it doesn't even matter if it's oil and gas or anything else. Everybody makes everything sound amazing. They do. This is the best deal ever. And I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm guilty of that too. I mean, I do
Yeah.
think I bring great deals to the table, but I think, you talked about, what are the risks? What I don't know what I don't know. And, I've been going down this rabbit hole and watching some other things and learning about, where can I get caught up? We were talking about this earlier. I built a GPT to help me find the red flags in the PPM that can catch me in ways that I didn't realize, I needed to pay attention to. And so if you're not using Chat GPT, you should absolutely be plugging stuff in. It's not always accurate about everything. And, there definitely is, you're missing that human component to it. But I think all of my investors have my phone number. They can call me anytime, preferably not at 1 o'clock in the morning. But I think having those conversations and really having a good grasp of the risks, if people are willing to talk about the risks, that matters. And what is their mitigation strategy around it? Because everything is going to have risk, but it's, how are they going to handle it and how do they address those things? And so I think, yeah, it's tough. I created a due diligence checklist that kind of shows, here's what we're going through. Here's what we look at, whether you're looking at my deal or somebody else's, here are some of the basic things that you definitely need to be asking and make sure you know the answer of. And like the ownership, I see bad deals where people are raising capital for something that they don't even own the rights to. And it's like, man, and that's easy to verify. And so we do have that list, but a lot of people don't know that they can actually check and verify that ownership. So, just little things like that, but you wouldn't know it if you weren't involved in the space.
Yep.
So,
Or if you don't know how to play the game yet. So,
right.
and I think that's a lot of times we beat ourselves up by like not knowing, but you don't know until you play. So you kind of
Right.
have to step in a little bit, just in a controlled way and with hopefully great mentors and with great
Right.
guidance and people that get in there first so you can see that. So
Yeah,
awesome. Well,
absolutely.
I have absolutely loved this time with you. We'll definitely bring you back on. So if thank you so much for your time. I mean, absolutely. And sharing your experience. I know it's never easy. Even time we share it, we heal a little bit, but we also relive it a
Yeah.
little bit. So it's all that. And I loved you sharing what worked, what hasn't, and how you're leading because of it, really. I mean, that level of transparency, as we stated, is really rare, but it really matters. And I love that you're showing up that way. So for anyone listening who wants to learn more or have a direct conversation with Courtney about oil and gas investing, where can they find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me Courtney Moeller on LinkedIn. I have a website. It's, CourtneyMoeller.com. You can book some time and I have an oil and gas report at oilandgasreport.net where you can kind of dig a little bit more into what the tax benefits look like. And it's got kind of my economic outlook for 2026 and, stuff like that. So,
Love it. Love it. Yes. And you are definitely a student of the game, which I appreciate. I appreciate being in business with you.
oh,
So thank you. And we're gonna link the show notes. We'll share some of those links that you said in there so you can
perfect.
easily click that and find it. And just to be clear for our listeners, this is not about rushing into anything, right? I think we stress that it's about getting educated, asking better questions, and deciding if this belongs in your portfolio for your strategy.
No, and I love that you just said that because you know what? There will always be another deal.
There will always be another deal. And that's short segment here. Because again, I know I'm like, we have to stop this at some point. But I remember the first deal my husband and I ever did. We were dating, which I don't recommend for all those, especially my kids maybe listening to this. But like we got into a deal before when we were dating and we bought some real estate together. And the deal almost fell through a couple times on the way to closing table as they do. And I just remember that we had this conversation. It's like, if this is not the right deal, there'll be another one. There'll always be another one. So
Yeah, absolutely.
awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you. And we'll definitely connect, and I'll be excited to see that email update.
Yes. Well, it was an honor to be a guest. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, I will talk to you soon.
Okay.
So, before we wrap up, I want you to leave with a few clear takeaways. Today wasn't about convincing you to invest in oil and gas. It was about understanding how it works, what to look for, who you can trust when you're evaluating alternative investments. Courtney shared her background, real deal examples, a deal that went very wrong, and most importantly, how those lessons shaped how she shows up as an operator today. If this sparked curiosity and you want to go deeper, I've linked the masterclass in investing in oil and gas with Courtney Moeller that we did earlier this year in the show notes for you to view. That's your next step if you want more education, no pressure. And if this is something you're interested in knowing more about, let's connect. There may be more opportunities opening up in 2026. Now, here's the most important first step before any investment. Have your personal financial statement or your PFS done and ready to go. Almost every single sponsor is going to ask you for that to be able to verify if you're an accredited or a sophisticated investor. Your PFS not only is your first step, it also is a way for you to create clarity and confidence. Because it's my birthday month, February, I'm offering my personal financial statement module, the PFS module, from the Real Estate Development Academy for $47. There's a link in the show notes. You'll get the spreadsheet that you can use over and over and over again, every year, every quarter, however you want to update it. Plus, you'll get a video walkthrough where I literally hold your hand throughout the process. Women often hesitate to invest because they're afraid of messing up. Let me give you some tough love. You might. That's part of learning. The real risk is never getting in the game, never vetting opportunities, and never building discernment. I hope today provided you with some information, some confidence to get in the game. Let's go. Before we wrap up, if someone in your world needs this conversation, a founder who's carrying a lot and ready for clarity, send this episode to her. These messages land deeper when we share them. And if you're in that space where you know your business can grow, you feel the potential, but the next strategic step isn't fully clear yet, let's talk. You don't need a new identity. You don't need to force a direction. You just need clarity that's aligned with your goals, your numbers, and the life you want to lead. I invite you to book a call with my team. We'll look at where you are, identify the real leverage points, and map the smartest next move, whether that's one of our free resources, a workshop, or deeper support. Clarity creates momentum. Let's get yours. Let's go. The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice. It's not financial advice. It's not investment advice. Real estate development, like any investment, carries risk. Before you make decisions, you should always consult a licensed professional, your attorney, your CPA, or your financial advisor, to name a few, to make sure you're making the right choice for your situation. I'm here to share insights and strategy, but you're responsible for your own decisions, and each situation is unique. So make sure you contact your professional team to give you your specific guidance for your specific case, as each real estate development's different and unique and has its own challenges and opportunities.